Brought to you by Hug House Productions.
Hi, hello, listener of Never Morphed. If you like this show, I am convinced you are going to love The Newest Olympian by Mike Schubert. Why am I so certain? Because that's one of the shows that inspired this show. Real ones who listen to the credits already know. Each week, Mike dives into the Percy Jackson series, which I love, joined by guests who are longtime fans of the Rick Riordan series. If you haven't read these books yet, this is the perfect way to get started and read along with Mike. They're so good. And like Animorphs, they're kids' books that touch on way more serious topics than you might expect. And they're about worldwide mythologies, starting with Greek and Roman. I know you gays love mythology. If you have already read the books and know how good they are, you'll love this series too. The dramatic irony, man. And if you know about the books from the Disney Plus series, Mike has done interviews and conversations with some of the cast of the show on The Newest Olympian too. Mike is a great host, a great editor, and obviously a huge inspiration for me. You can find The Newest Olympian in the show notes or wherever you get your podcasts. Go subscribe right now and enjoy.
Brought to you by Hug House Productions.
Welcome back to another episode of Never Morphed, a series in which I read every Animorphs book for the first time. As always, this podcast is about books for kids, but this podcast is definitely absolutely not for kids. So get gone. Get out of here, little baby. My guest for Book 8 is my dear friend Fresco. You can find more of their work with their partner Kay Alohi on their YouTube channel, Your Enrichment Team, their Etsy shop, Madcap Menagerie, and their writing project, The Neon Sanctuary. You can find them on Tumblr at Fortunately Fresco, and all their projects are linked in their pinned post, which is also linked in the show notes for this episode. Now you might be thinking, hey, hold up. What about the first Megamorphs book? That's book number 7.5. Well, I have read 7.5 and I have made an episode about it with my sweet husband, Zach. And you can find that at patreon.com/hughousepodz. All of the Megamorphs books, Alternamorphs books, the TV series, the video games, anything else that I come across that is not a mainline book will not be released on the main feed until I've read all 54 mainline books. So if you want it now and you want it early and you want it, and I guess at the right time, go to patreon.com/hughousepodz. And hey, I am also about to undergo a big surgery. It's a good one. It's medically necessary and it's going to hopefully improve my life quite a bit. So this would be a really great time for you to go support us on patreon.com/hughousepodz. Thank you. This conversation is so good, and I'm so excited for y'all to hear it, but as a heads up, I did not like this one. This one could have been my favorite book so far, but no. So I like it. I like 99% of it. Mostly, I like 85%. Anyway, let's get into it. You'll get there. Enjoy. Fresco, I am so excited to have you here to talk about Book 8. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
I think it's worth saying that you and I met on a several-hour car drive to go to Noah's wedding.
Yes.
It was so fun. Anne and I were just like, oh yeah, we've got some people who are also coming to this wedding. There's like a drive to the venue and the area where we're staying. So let's just like get a van and carpool with a bunch of people who we don't know, we've never met, but they're Noah's friends, so it should be fine. We got into the car and we immediately hit it off.
It was awesome. And
it was so lovely.
We were so excited to meet you. Have I told you that story from our point of view, me and my partner?
No!
So we had been fans of your writing about podcasts for months before we met. And we have this thing that I've noticed we tend to do a lot, which is if there's a medium that we are planning to work in or trying to work in, which podcast is one of those mediums, we will, as a little motivating goof, start telling each other like, oh, we've got to do better at this thing, or this person whose work we like is going to get us. And we started doing that with like, oh, we got to get better at this, or one day Will Williams is going to kill us.
Yep, that's me.
Which there was absolutely nothing that you did that made us think that. It was just a goof.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we were like, oh, we're going to carpool with some of Noah's friends. Who? Whomst?
that's me. And then you met me and you're like, oh, a fucking nerd. Okay.
we really liked you, and we liked everyone in that car.
That car ride was so good. It was so pleasant. Well, I am thrilled to have you here. This feels like a very good full circle kind of moment. That being said, I must say, this is my least favorite book so far.
I know, I was listening to your live react and going like, oh, this is going to be interesting.
Yes. Now, I do believe that this is my least favorite book because I am a Rachel. I am a Rachel and I am a Marco. And that comes up.
Yeah. I think I agree with you about the things you don't like about this book, I will say.
Amazing. So, Fresco, what is your history with the Animorphs books? When did you first start reading them?
I think that when I signed up for this show, I might have said that I was reading them in middle school, but shortly after that, I realized that I think I was actually reading them in elementary school.
Nice.
It's this really weird thing where, like, I can't actually concretely remember a time when I hadn't read any Animorphs books, even though I know that some of my childhood memories must have been from that time.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember that I think I only read the books that were available in my classroom and maybe the school library. And I would pick them based on Axe and Cassie were my two favorite characters, so I would read their books. So I think I read the first book when I was a kid, and I know that I read some books way later in the series, but I didn't read the whole series as a kid. I just read, like, the Axe and Cassie books over and over again and ended up accidentally stealing, like, 3 of them from my school classroom because I just kept reading them and never gave them back.
That's okay. You deserved them. That's fine.
Thank you.
Did you ever go back and read them all in sequence?
Yes, I have. Ooh. I don't know if we might hear from 2017 Fresco, because when I was rereading the books for this book, I found that my reading app had kept notes that I took in 2017. Oh my God. So I was reading through them like, oh, I don't agree with this opinion anymore. No, I was right about this one. Like,
that's so fun.
It was really fun. And I think these books a little bit taught me critical thinking.
Hell yeah.
I was raised in a very, I guess I shouldn't say very, a like moderately religious, moderately conservative household.
Mm-hmm.
And was definitely like, my mother would be watching Fox News and stuff, so I was getting hit with all that propaganda kind of passively. Right. But then I was reading these books about about everything that happens in these books. And I think it taught me sort of like, what if I think about the things my government tells me?
That's so lovely. I think that's probably like kind of exactly why they were written and how they were written too.
It seems like it.
I love that. So was 2017 when you went back and read them all the full way through?
I think so. I think I attempted that a couple of times, and I don't know if I succeeded both times or if I only did it once, but I have read the whole series now.
Nice. What differences did you notice reading it in 2017 than when you read some of the books as a kid?
Definitely that I was able to pick up more on some of the subtler plot threads and character arcs, and kind of, there was stuff that I think I recognized unconsciously as a kid, or if not recognized, it kind of shaped sort of how I expect fiction to work. But as an adult reading it, I could actually recognize those things of like how all of the characters work as narrative devices to get their themes across and stuff like that. And then reading it now, even looking back on my 2017 self, I see stuff where I'm like, oh, I thought I didn't like this because it was a badly executed thing, but actually I think it was well executed and it's just a trope I don't like, or that kind of stuff.
Well, I hate pointing this out, but 2017 is almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Awful.
call that kind of psychic damage Shrek damage? Because it's the kind of damage I take when I remember when Shrek came out.
I don't want to talk about it. Did you find on your reread that Axe and Cassie were still your favorites?
I still think... I'm trying to structure this without any spoilers. Cassie is still really high up for me. Axe, I think, like, nostalgically, he's probably still my favorite character because of what he meant to me as a kid, but in terms of how his narrative and stuff is handled, I would say he's much lower for me now than he used to be.
Okay. Interesting.
I will also say, I think when I was a kid, Cassie was my favorite just because she liked animals and I liked animals.
Oh, yeah, straight up. Growing up, there's no way she wouldn't have been my favorite, right? Which is very funny because, again, now I am fully a Rachel.
Honestly, part of what I've been enjoying from listening to this is just hearing like nuanced discussions about Cassie instead of some of the other discussions that happen in the fandom where people just kind of slam her.
Why? What? How dare she be nice?
Right. Like, how dare she be conflicted about the things they're having to do?
Right. Oh, fandoms. Have you like dipped deep into the Animorphs fandom at all?
I have written some fan fiction.
Hell yeah!
And I've read a lot of fan fiction. And I think I was reading and writing fan fiction when I was a child. I think I had, like, several years ago, I rediscovered a handwritten note page of Animorphs fan fiction that all I remember from it was, like, it was just Axe running somewhere, and I had written that he was talking to Tobias in the sky.
Okay. Hey, very thematically tied to today's book.
Yeah. I had probably just read this book and then started writing that.
Wow. Oh, I love that.
What I really remember, and I looked for it, and I'm so sad that I can't find it, is that when I was a kid, somebody on probably like DeviantArt or something had written a parody of Prince Ali from the movie Aladdin, but it was Visor 3.
Good. Man, we'll get into it, but for a while, this book really had me going like, man, I guess it's sayonara to my favorite idiot. I was like pre-grieving. I was like, I guess my funny little guy is gone.
I have some great news for you.
Yeah. I have some great asterisk news for you.
I have a silver lining for you.
Yeah, it really, truly is. So I think with that, oh wait, no, I have a really important question. Did you watch the TV show?
I watched, I think, an episode of it as a child that I rented from a physical video store, and I hated it so much. And then as an adult, I watched it, and my partner, Kayalohi, who did not read these books as a child and has no nostalgic attachment to them, watched the entire Nickelodeon TV series with me. And also read the Animorphs wiki for me.
Good. Yeah, I really love that one of the consistent themes is that Animorphs fans who were fans of the books, like typically anymore, like as somebody who read the Percy Jackson series and absolutely loved it, when the Percy Jackson series came out, like you could not hold me back from watching it. Even like A Series of Unfortunate Events, I was such a huge fan. You could not pull me out of that theater to go see the movie, even though the movie was not good. But this show, everyone is like either one, no, I didn't watch it. I didn't even really realize that it existed. Or two, I watched one episode, said, what the fuck is this? And never watched it again.
Yeah.
I love that.
I will say I have an appreciation for it now because it's so silly and goofy. And I'm like, these kids deserve a silly and goofy time.
So this is also the first book that has it has a prologue, and it also has little notes before the start of each chapter.
Yes.
Which I did not think to look up that word before before
I
we
don't know it
recorded.
either, so I can't help.
The pre-thingy.
Mhm.
Okay, I have to look this up or else everybody is going to murder me. But it does have a prologue, which I was very surprised by. And the prologue comes before any of this happens.
Right. Oh, before we get too far into the book, I wanted to ask
Yes.
you a question. Are you
Yes.
reading digital or physical copies?
I am reading digital copies.
I wanted to tell you something about the cover of, I don't know if anyone has already told you this already. The cover, I don't know how many of the books were like this, but I know book 8 was like this. If you open the cover on the physical book, there's a picture on the inside cover that, like, human Axe's face on the cover is a cutout. And when you open it to the next cover, it's him standing there.
Oh!
And that's why some of the faces on the covers look like extra weird, because they're actually on the next page and it's a cutout.
Oh, whoa! No, I did not know that. That's crazy. So there's like, I guess, okay, so I don't really put a lot of stock into these cover images in regards to like how closely they may or may not resemble these characters, because I think they're bullshit, mostly because, like, okay, listen, I know that Tobias is canonically blonde, but no, he's not. He's not. He is not blonde. You can't convince me.
Well, he's not anymore.
Aw.
I'm sorry, Tobias.
Sorry, Tobias. But sometimes you gotta laugh through the pain, buddy. He knows this. He knows this. Okay, I looked up the word. It's an epigraph. It is not an epithet. This is what got mixed up. All my brain would give me is epithet, and that is certainly not it. It is
Depending
an epigraph.
on how you write it.
That's so true. So, with this prologue, we get this scene where Axe is on the dome ship as it gets destroyed and he gets hurtled down to Earth. It's crazy. So he's on this dome ship with his big brother Elfangor, and he is being a little punk. He refers to the captain, whose name is Nerafir, that is such a good name to say.
I love that name.
It's incredible. It's beautiful. Nerafir. Ooh, so good. So he's the captain, and he's the war prince, which we later find out is hierarchically above Elfangor, I think. Because Elfangor is like a normal prince, and this one's a war prince?
I don't know how much I should be saying.
Legit, sure. Elfangor is some sort of prince. And Nerafir may or may not be hierarchically above him, but he is a war prince. He's the captain of the dome ship. And we open up with Axe referring to Nerafir as Old Hoof and Tail, which is clearly like the smarmy little punk name that Elfangor has given Nerafir, kind of like Old Ball and Chain, which I thought was precious.
I really love that as a nickname because it feels like a human being nicknamed, like Old Hand and Foot.
Just like the disease. That's great. I guess that's hand, foot, and mouth. But regardless. So Elfangor, or Axe calls Nerafir Old Hoof and Tail, and Elfangor thinks that Nerafir can probably overhear him, and he's like, oh my god, stop, you're gonna get me in trouble. It's so funny. They're so siblings. Like, I was kind of expecting Elfangor to have this, like around anybody, have this very noble, regal, stoic demeanor. And around Axe, he is just his older brother, and he's like literally just a dude. It's very sweet.
I know, I'm so sad about it.
I know. So Axe is being a little scamp, and then as they're talking, first off, we get a little note here on like a recurring theme for Axe that certainly has not come up in the books until now. And it's that Axe has a bit of an inferiority complex around Elfangor.
Right.
He's always talking about how like when Elfangor is around, it's really hard for him to feel special.
Yeah. And I have a note. I wrote down the quote of when it was all over, Elfangor would be even more a big hero, and I would still be the little brother, the child.
Yeah.
Which is one, tragic, and two, the note that I wrote down for that was Axe still sees war as a theoretical. The consequences of battle are seen in reputations and titles shifting, not lives and families torn apart. Axe's underlying assumption is that it will be all over and Elfangor will still be alive.
Fresco, that's a fucking good note.
Thank you.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. Like, this does come up even later when we get this confrontation with Rachel, where she is like, we are not pawns in a game you are playing. Like, he really does. He doesn't get it. And like, how could he?
Right.
You know, he is a kid, and he seems to be like a kid who is like kind of around battle to some degree, but like very sequestered away. And he seems to have like quite a lot of privilege just in Andalite society. So this totally makes sense. And I think like him coming to terms with the reality of what this all means is like a pretty fundamentally big part of this book.
Definitely. And I think it's really interesting that he, of all the kids, he's the one who's been like training to be a soldier. He's the artist, but because he's coming later to the series, he's like they're already ahead of him in terms of understanding the actual implications of war.
And I do think like, okay, so this is going to be a tangent, and it's also going to be depressing. But there are two podcasts that I've been listening to. One is older and one is a current ongoing season of a show. The first is The Line, which was created by Dan Taberski. And the other is the third season of In the Dark, which Dan Taberski has done great work in podcasting. He released Hysterical this year, which was about quote unquote mass hysteria. He did the podcast that was investigating Havana syndrome and like looking into like what the fuck, because it turns out that like maybe it was actually kind of real. Yeah, wild shit. And In the Dark, that's the podcast that had formerly literally gotten somebody off of death row. Yes. So Dan Taberski's The Line and this season of In the Dark are both looking at American war crimes in the Middle East.
Oof.
And both podcasts, but I would say so far even more The Line, boil down to this concept of like the people who are sort of the numbest to the realities of war and the most likely to like allow really fucking horrific things without batting an eye are not the people who are the furthest removed. They are the American soldiers we have trained to be like this.
Oof.
Yes. They're like harrowing podcasts, both of them. But they are so deeply important. And both of them are critical, not just like of the soldiers who did these things, but of the entire system of American militarization. And I don't know, what was going through the Applegate's mind, but I do think like, thinking of how we train soldiers as this, like, you are doing a good versus evil thing.
Right.
American soldiers anymore are literally trained using video games sometimes. Like, that seems to come through really strong with Axe. Like, he just really takes this all for granted as like a totally normal thing that like it has impacts, but he doesn't have to like, they're not going to directly impact him. He doesn't think in the way that like we know they will.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems to do that more than any of the human kids who are just now experiencing it and seeing how terrible it is. Like, it's like second nature for Axe almost.
Yes, that's a really good analysis.
Thank you. Those podcasts are fucking rough.
It sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do sound important, like you said.
But like you go in with a real good headspace, and even then, if you gotta get out of there, you should get out of there. So while they're on this ship fucking around, they see a Yeerk mothership, and everybody whips into go mode. They are launching their fighters. Axe is trying so hard to join, but we learn that he is an Arist, which is really hard to pronounce fully out loud. It's Aristh. Arist.
That word's been part of my like subconscious vocabulary since I was like 8. So.
I bet. It's a new one for me, so my mouth is still like figuring it out.
That makes sense.
And this means like warrior cadet. So he is in training. He is not a warrior. So they're telling him like, no, you can't come and fight. You're like 5 years old.
You're a baby?
Yeah. And he's like really determined. So he's following Elfangor for a while. And Elfangor is telling him, get to the dome. You'll be safe there. You have to go. And before Elfangor finally like leaves for real, there's this moment, and I cut this this quote out. It says, Elfangor hesitated for just a moment before rushing on. He arched his tail forward. I reached forward with my own tail, arching it up over my back. We touched tail blades. And then after that, Elfangor is like, stay safe, go to the dome ship. This is so sweet. This is like a little like hug or like a salute. I don't know if there is like a tangible difference between what a hug and a salute would be in Andalite culture. But I just thought this was so lovely.
Me too. And there's a line right before, like, I think during this same scene where Axe says, yes, my prince, I said, sounding very stiff and formal, but as he turned to enter the drop shaft, I couldn't let him go thinking I was mad at him. And my note on the line, I couldn't let him go thinking I was mad at him, is this gave me a fucking complex. Because I
God, yeah.
So I was like, I have to tell people that I love them every time we leave, or what if they die or I die?
Okay, dude, truly, I think that's a good practice. It's a good practice. So Axe goes up to the dome, and he is literally the only one in the dome, which we know. But like, it feels so different for him to be alone in the dome in this context, and like really to have him feel this sense of complete stark isolation from everybody else. And then that is further emphasized when the blade ship arrives and the rest of the dome ship detaches from the dome itself so that it can more agilely fight.
Right.
And Axe watches as the rest of the ship gets all the way exploded. Like full Clark Kent style.
Yeah.
How did this hit when you first read it? Do you remember?
I am trying to think. First, before I forget, I want to say, I think it says a lot. I feel like it says a lot about just the confidence of the Andalites that they let a child go on this mission.
Yeah, crazy.
They were so sure nothing would go wrong.
Oh, fellas.
I think as a child, you asked earlier what some of the differences were between reading this as a kid and rereading it as an adult, and I forgot to say that definitely the series feels a lot more tragic now that I'm now that I'm at like the same age or younger than the protagonists. So I think as a kid, I just parsed this as like, and that's how the adventure started. Oh, it sounds scary.
Sure.
He seems upset. And like, I think I had empathy for the characters, but it didn't hit at all in the same way that it hits now, where I'm like, he's a baby who just watched his brother and a bunch of other adults die. And now he's all alone.
Yeah, all alone in a dome at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
Nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So then we kind of get like a speed run through bringing us up to speed for where he is now with the Animorphs.
Right.
And this is when he learns that Elfangor was killed by Visser 3. And this is when we learn that per Andalite custom, he has to be the one to avenge his brother's death. He has to be the one to kill Visser 3.
Yeah.
Not good.
Not good. That's
not good.
I feel like a child shouldn't have to do that, perhaps.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a good rule. As we'll get into, I'm sure, I think Andalite culture is fucked up. So, chapter 1, we have a quite a tone shift.
About the legs.
Yes. And then also, they're going to go see a movie. So, Axe wants to learn about human culture. He wants to learn the most about human culture. So, he has figured out that movies are very important for human culture, or at least like American human culture. And so he wants to go see a movie.
I have a note about like one of the first lines of this chapter before we get into the actual plot of this chapter. So after the note about how humans seldom fall over despite walking on two legs, it's, my full name is Aximili Esgaruth Isthil. My human friends call me Axe. And I took a note on this and then talked with my partner about it to get their thoughts and make sure that everything I'm about to say is cool to say on a podcast. My partner's name is Kealohi, which is a Hawaiian name.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a lot of times run into people who try to just shorten that to K.
What?
Which is literally just the. So we both have like some thoughts and feelings on how immediately the other Animorphs just bestowed this nickname upon him. Like,
totally.
So I went back to check, and it was as soon as he introduced himself. I think it might have been Marco was like, Axe, we'll call you Axe.
Yeah, that's classic Marco.
Which, like, I'm guessing Jake is presumably short for Jacob, and Cassie might be short for Cassandra. So it's not like Axe is the only one with a nickname. But Kealohi pointed out, like, I wrote down what he said, which is, Axe is a perfectly good English-speaking nickname, but, like, culturally, does this butcher the meaning of Axe's name?
Right.
And, like,
and it's different when somebody has a nickname like Jake for Jacob. Like, that's a pretty standard thing. And it's not because Jacob is hard to pronounce or seems foreign.
Right.
When you're giving a nickname that's unprompted and revolves around not wanting to learn how to pronounce somebody else's name, that's shitty.
Right. And like, I feel weird even giving this note because I do call him Axe just because that's what he's called throughout the series. And like, I do not remember if there's ever attention drawn to this, of the fact that they don't use his full name. I just thought it was worth bringing up and thinking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really important. I'm guessing that this is something that the Applegates just like didn't really consider. But I do think it's so important.
If we do take it, like, I am sure you're right that probably Kay Applegate and Michael Grant probably just weren't thinking about it, at least in this book. But if I do take it as part of what Axe as a person would be realistically experiencing, it really adds to kind of the alienation that he's going through if he doesn't even get to hear his name anymore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And even if he does, like, I am sure that there's like dialect that he doesn't get to hear, and
Especially because
pronunciation, and
they're talking to him out loud, and that's not how animals talk.
Right. Yeah, there's the sense of otherness here is so stark. I think that like this is the first book where the title like unequivocally makes sense.
Mhm.
Because it's the alien, and like that's true. He is. He is an alien, indisputably. But also, like, again, that feeling of otherness, that feeling of isolation and separation from any culture that he could recognize as his own, and the way that he is treated in kind.
Yeah, and like I don't want to get too far into this because it's from a later chapter, but there's a moment where he's like running through the woods and kind of having like a panic attack, partly about how different the woods are. And it's very, very like this poor child.
Yeah. Yes, I really, for as much as this book tested me, which we will get to continually, there are some parts that were so beautifully written. This is like one of the most lyrical books so far. There is a certain elegance to it that I don't think the others have had, and I think that largely part of that is because like Axe is a royal, you know, like there is this sort of regal sense about him that I hadn't really gotten externally looking at Axe. But being in his own perspective, it really comes through.
Yeah, like you were saying, the amount of like, sorry, this is slightly tangential, but like the amount of privilege that he kind of had on his home planet of like, he gets to go on the mission, which like turned out to not be great for him.
No, turned out to be a really bad plan. Turns out that sometimes being super privileged makes you make really stupid decisions. Okay, so they're going to go see this movie because he wants to go see the movie, and they're only going to let him watch the first hour. And this is the first moment where I was like, this book is trying my suspension of disbelief. Because I'm sorry, I have never, and I've been to many a movie theater in many a city, I have never been to a movie theater that doesn't have like a single stall family bathroom somewhere.
And it's not like there's cameras in there.
Right. Like, so their whole thing is that they don't want him because it's going to take some time to get to the mall, to go to the movie theater. And then they want to make sure that he's not, you know, stuck in the morph, that he is not we get another vocab here, that he doesn't turn into a nothlet, which is somebody who's stuck in a morph like Tobias. So they're like, okay, you could only watch the first hour and then we're going to leave. That's absurd.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Like later in the book, they kind of say that morphing takes energy. And there's a point later where he was going to morph and demorph, but decided not to because he's too tired.
Sure.
So if I was trying to like backwards justify it, I would go with that. But they don't say that here. They just say that he can only watch the first hour.
They don't. And also like, okay, demorph, take 10 minutes. Morph again, and then like, oh no, you're gonna have to go struggle through watching a movie? Like, that is a leisurely activity. Absolutely not.
Maybe the human kids can kind of tell how this is gonna go, and they're like, we only want to be here for an hour.
Yeah, you know, that's honestly so fucking fair, because of course this shit does not go well.
No. No, it doesn't.
So everyone is in the woods, so he can morph before they're heading off to the mall. Tobias is keeping watch above, and this is the first moment where Axe points out that Tobias has not asked him at all, like, is there any way I can get unmorphed?
Right.
And this is a recurring theme.
I don't even have a note on this line. I just highlighted it in my copy of the book because I think I like couldn't even think of anything to say other than like, oof. Just for a long time, I expected Tobias to ask me the question that must have haunted him day and night, whether it would ever be possible for him to escape his hawk body. But he never did. I guess he was afraid of the answer.
Afraid of the answer.
So I didn't volunteer one. Just oof.
Oof. I also clipped this excerpt, and then my note is, yeah, lol.
Like, if I'm Tobias, I'm probably like, if the answer was yes, he would have just told me. I'm not going to ask.
Yeah, straight up. And also, like, I don't know, maybe it's just, like, less complicated for Tobias to not know.
Yeah.
And not have to grapple with any of these feelings again. So he then also lets on, like, again, that he's trying to learn the most about humans. And this is where another recurring, like, kind of the theme of one of the big themes of the book comes up, where he says the trick would be to learn about the humans without letting them learn too much about Andalites. There were things I could never tell the humans, things that might make them turn against me. To which I said, yeah, I bet.
One of my notes on this book was just, Will, how does it feel to be so right about the Andalites?
I'm so fucking right. Though I gotta say, like, what it resolves with, because we get some answers in this book, I am convinced that they're doing way worse shit, honestly. I'm convinced that this is, like, not even close to the extent.
I mean, even just what they do to Axe at the end of this book is pretty bad.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yes. Yes. So Axe morphs and Rachel gives him some preppy ass clothes and they leave. So we get to the movie. They are in the previews, and the first thing I want to say here is that Axe will not shut the fuck up. I hate when people talk during movies. It drives me fucking insane. I don't even like it on, like, funny ha-ha, like, shut up. Like, I'm watching the movie. Like, the movie was made on purpose. Shut up.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
They made this on purpose so we would watch it.
Right, exactly. Like, I am not a believer that, like, a film gets anything positive added to it when some random person is saying words that aren't in the script. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, I really fucking hope that they tell him to shut the fuck up.
I'm so stressed for him that he like doesn't know and they're not telling him.
I know. It's so, the way that they just throw Axe into situations, like, I understand that, one, it's because they're kids, and two, because this is a fictional book where things need to happen.
That I think they had like a month to write.
Right. Yes. But the way that they just throw him into situations, expecting him to know things for literally no fucking reason. Like, he's like, I don't understand the plot of this movie. And they're like, well, that was just a preview. And he's like, what the fuck is a preview? Like, why wouldn't you tell him these things? Tell him. It makes me so mad. Like, I get it. But it just feels like bad friendship. Like,
yeah, tell him before you get there.
If I were going to take somebody to the movies for the very first time and they had never, ever had the experience of going to see a movie, I would start with, like, first things first, probably bring a little jacket, because typically movie theaters are kind of chilly. Second, we'll drive there and then we'll get there, and it's going to be a huge building, and you walk through the doors, and if you already have your ticket, then somebody will take your ticket, and then there's a concession stand. Like, I would walk through every fucking part of the process,
because you're a good friend.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is true because I don't actually remember a lot of this series. But just based on the way Axe reacts to things in this book and the way, like, the dome ship is described, I don't know if Andalites even have buildings.
Oh my, guys!
And they're just, like, taking him to a movie theater and a school.
Like, yeah, these are, like, the buildingest buildings. And a mall? A mall is just a huge building with tiny little buildings inside of it.
Yeah, like, I guess at least it's big, but, like...
Yeah!
They put a big field on their spaceship.
Yes! to prepare him, guys. And if you don't, and then if you don't, you will see what happens. You don't like it. It's not an outcome that you enjoy because he's getting super bored watching this Star Trek film. I don't know anything about Star Trek. Do you know, is this supposed to be like a specific Star Trek movie?
Honestly, the Star Trek that I know the most about is Deep Space Nine. So I think I like Deep Space Nine for a lot of the same reasons that I like Animorphs. But
yeah, it seems like there's a lot of crossover between Deep Space Nine fans and Animorphs fans.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine, I think, is considered kind of the dark Star Trek.
Yes,
but
Dark Trek.
I would guess maybe, I was going to say maybe Wrath of Khan, but I don't actually know the years that any of the movies came out, so I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, who's to say? I'm not going to look it up.
Me neither.
So he is super bored. He is deeply disinterested in this plot. So then he starts. Well, first off he eats a bunch of popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
And then he eats the box that the popcorn was in.
Can I read this part out?
Yes.
And then tell you what it meant to me as a small child?
Yes.
So it's here. Just take the box, Marco said. He handed me the box of popcorn. I quickly ate the rest of it. Not the box, Marco wailed. You don't eat the box! This was the first joke that I remember ever encountering as a child where the medium itself was used to make the joke better. Of like, if we were watching this, we wouldn't get that reveal because we would just see him eat the box.
Yes.
But because we can't see it, then the first time we find out about it is Marco just going, no!
Yeah.
And this scene... There's a lot of like tropes and stuff in Animorphs that I do not enjoy in any other media. And the way that I usually talk about that is I say that Animorphs like used up my allotment for XYZ trope. And
the quota.
I think all of Axe's like fish out of water stuff and this scene in particular used up all of my tolerance for secondhand embarrassment. Because I have a nostalgic love for this scene, but oh my god, I hate everything about it.
Yes. Yeah, it stresses me out. I have a pretty high tolerance for secondhand embarrassment media. Namely, I think that Succession is one of the best shows ever made, and I think that is also a show that would make most other anxious people throw up to death.
Ooh, oh no.
It's like cranked up hard. But I love it. But this scene, this boy, I think what it is again, like, he literally has no reason to know any better. Nobody is doing anything for him. They are just expecting him to know shit. And so, like, because it's so out of his control and he's so blameless in it, like, it's so much more stressful.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'm, like, anticipating him having to deal with the repercussions of things that he's doing that he doesn't know are wrong. And I'm like, someone just help him.
You guys, you brought a horse to the movie theater.
Literally.
And we're just like, this horse will know how to behave.
Yeah, this horse knows how to be polite. So... because he is bored, he starts crawling on the floor and eating more popcorn off the floor.
Which I just realized, and I don't know if you want to take this out and put it in after we get to this. It makes a lot of sense that Axe thinks it's okay to eat stuff off the floor.
Oh my god! Oh my god! You're so right. I didn't think about. Yeah, of course he thinks it's fine.
This is where the food goes.
That's where food is. Oh my god. Yeah. So he is. So he is eating popcorn. He is eating what he calls globules. We find out that they're Raisinets.
I loved your notes that just like, God, I hope that's chocolate.
Yeah. like it could be like chewed up gum. There's so many things that could be happening here, and all of them are repulsive.
All of them are bad. He's even like, the humans have coated the floor in a sticky substance to make it easier. Honey, no.
Honey, no. So then they're like, we gotta leave. We have to go. We have to go now because he is literally trying to steal candy from a baby.
Steal candy from a baby.
They drag him out. Marco and Jake literally have to like hold him and carry him while he is just shouting globules. It's pretty spectacular.
I can't tell if I love or hate that this seems to be the human instinct equivalent of like, oh my god, I just killed a rat and ate it and I couldn't stop myself. It's just
oh my
globules,
god, yeah.
globules.
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but that's so accurate. He can't control this human morph's need to taste things.
That's like the only way I can rationalize why he thought it was okay to try to steal food from a child.
I don't know. In my head, I was like, it's probably some like survival of the fittest Andalite thing. Like
that does sound like them.
So next chapter, they leave the movie theater. The globules, we find out, were raisinets. Thank fuck. And then Tobias is like, hey, sup. So there's a man yelling about yurks.
Yeah.
And they're like, hello? And then they see him, and there's a man, and he is yelling about yurks. And there's sirens coming, and they watch as this scene is crazy. This scene's crazy.
My partner's question was, why did Tobias wait to tell them this? Well, they're at the movie. I'm not going to interrupt their movie.
Yeah. Okay.
Jake said we're taking a break.
This book feels, again, like some parts of it are so beautiful and so lyrical, but this is the first book where I was consistently like, this is sloppy. Like this one is written so sloppy. And again, I think that is the fault of nobody but Scholastic, to be very clear. Mm-hmm. But there were so many moments, like with the bathroom, like you could just go to the single stall bathroom. Like there's no reason to just cap him at an hour. With a bunch of stuff we'll get to later on, I was consistently like, this simply does not make sense. Like this is not thought out well. But again, they literally had like a month. And so I think for that, they're doing great.
Yeah.
But it seemed worth noting that this is the first one where my suspension of disbelief was pushed to its limit.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. It's very like, some of it I can explain away to myself as, well, they're children and they're doing their best. And then some of it I'm like, no. Yeah. No, this doesn't make sense.
Yep. Nope, that ain't it. And I think this is another good example. Tobias, this is important. Maybe tell them. So they watch as this yelling man pulls a dying yerk out of his ear as the cops show up. It's horrific. Yeah. And it's especially horrific after having that book with Jake, where Jake was made a controller, which will come up later in the book. But like, yeesh, this was fucking rough. And again, just crazy. And seeing this, Jake and like pretty much everybody but Rachel and Axe are like celebrating. They're like, oh my God, after we destroyed the Kandrona, it's working. The Yerks are dying. Mm-hmm. And now, because we've done so much damage, the Yerks are going to die for a bunch of people. And then those people will come forward and they'll have no way to cover up the news. And it'll get out and we'll finally have like mass allies on our side. And like we can actually approach this worldwide as the threat that it is. And I was like, well, that's a lot of conjecture.
Yeah.
That's a leap.
I have a bunch of notes on this chapter.
Yes, please do tell.
I'm not sure what order to go in, and please stop me if you want to stop me.
I think anything except like once we get to the cylinder,
Right.
I want to come back together. But anything that you have before that, go for it.
Okay. So there's a line, as always, we were careful not to appear to be a group.
Yes.
And the note that I wrote for that is, I really like how quickly this detail gets across the level of fear these kids are operating under, because Jake and Rachel are cousins, and Jake and Marco are best friends, and Rachel and Cassie are best friends. So it's not that weird for the four of them to be seen together. The series starts with the four of them and Tobias walking home together acts as the only anomaly. But they're already starting to get militant about anything that could possibly draw attention to them. And then my next line is, in hindsight, it's pretty funny for details like this to pop up while they're risking everything just to take Axe to the movies.
Yes, that's so true.
And there is a line when the guy first shows up screaming, where it says, "My human body felt as if it had been jolted with electricity. Human bodies become very tense when surprised." Which my note from 2017 on that note just says, "Andalites don't?" ? And I feel like there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of emphasis in this book on what it feels like to be upset in a human body.
Yes, there's a lot of focus on adrenaline specifically,
which
I found that fascinating.
Yeah, like from a in-universe standpoint, it makes me wonder if Andalites don't have an equivalent of that. And from just a narrative standpoint, I think it's a really good way to kind of get that feeling across to children.
Yes, and like good representation too.
Yeah, of like what it feels like to be overwhelmed by panic.
And like for kids who have anxiety disorders and like don't know what that is, I think that this would have been really nice to read about and like see somebody else go through. But I also think this kind of ties back to your note about Axe feeling almost like the war is like a hypothetical. Like he doesn't have the dread. He doesn't have the physical sensation of being overwhelmed by anxiety and fear.
So that's a really good point.
Right? So like, of course they kind of play into each other. Of course the stakes don't feel like the stakes that they are until he's in this human form. And when he's in this human form, he consistently has more trouble grappling with all of these Andalite cultural teachings. And I think that it's partially because he can like feel it in his body.
Oh, that's a really good, yeah.
Crazy. Okay, maybe this book is actually genius.
Except for the one scene that we'll get to. I'm trying to look at which of my notes are before the cylinder and which ones are after. Okay, there's the man was screaming now and yanking at his ear. I could just see the slimy tip of the dying ear because it slithered out of the man's head. Can't we help him? It was Cassie. She and Rachel had defied Prince Jake's order to split up. And what I wrote there is that they're teetering right on the line between kids and soldiers. Rachel and Cassie and maybe even Jake were probably not thinking about this in terms of defying an order, but Axe does.
Yes. And this becomes huge later on.
Yeah.
And also again, like his like almost understanding of how human interpersonal relationships work. Because he's so rooted in this concept of hierarchy and orders and directives and not like they're human people with agency, you know?
Like, it's like he's trying to figure out the correct way to do things, but in the sense of like, what rules should I be following, and not in the sense of how do I interact with people?
Right. And not in the sense of like, what would be fulfilling for me or feel good for me, or like who is the person that I want to be for my own sake?
Yes.
You know?
It's just what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Very, very Crystal Gems.
Yeah. And then,
you know Rebecca sugar fucked with these books.
Oh god, yeah, that would make a lot of sense. I have no opinion on Taylor Swift's music, but I have seen some people theorize that she might have been an Animorphs fan because the timing would have worked out, and they feel like a lot of her songs really reflect themes from the Animorphs books. I Again, I have no opinion on her music, including that, but that's something that for some reason has always stuck in my head as a possibility.
That would rule. That would make me like her like 0.3% more, which for her I think would be statistically significant.
Yeah.
I
think the only other note that I have before the cylinder is Jake is saying, I expected this to start happening weeks ago. Yerk's dying. Controller's suddenly free and human again. He grinned. It was a savage look. And the line that I wrote down is, this is a creature with no mouth looking at a creature with teeth smiling about death.
Yeesh. Damn. Metal as fuck.
And then I just have a very innocuous note on about Jake. His voice had risen, becoming higher, and the words came out faster. He was obviously excited. And my only note on that is just, Axe is figuring out tone of voice.
Oh, good job. The duality of Fresco.
And then,
I did realize while you were talking that before cylinder is BC.
BC. How we split up this book.
Yeah. Before cylinder and after death.
Well, yeah.
Yep. Should we talk about the cylinder?
I'm actually wrong. I had one more note.
Go for it.
Where everyone else is excited. Rachel is a true warrior. She does not underestimate her enemies. She was not ready to start talking about victory, but the others were all very happy. They believed that many Yerks would die and the hosts would be free to tell the world the truth. They believed they had won the war. And my note here is, I'm sorry that I just keep reading notes at you.
No, this is good.
Okay.
This is good. This is what the podcast is.
Okay. I wrote down, I could extend this quote for like another page and a half. The whole scene is devastating. They believed they had won the war is just the sentence that hits me the hardest. It does so much to not only imply that they're wrong, but to also reinforce Axe's separation from the rest of the team. And in this instance, to also separate Rachel from the others. They believed they had won the war. Axe knows better because he has more context, and Rachel knows better because of some intrinsic quality that Axe sees in her, something that makes her a quote-unquote true warrior.
Yes, absolutely. I loved the detail that Rachel was like, chill.
Yeah.
Like let's, I mean, she's kind of same wavelength with me here. She's like, that's a lot of conjecture. Let's not take these leaps. Like, there's so many unknowns. We can't even assume that this is a direct correlation to the Kandrona. Like, she's so with it. And I think that could be seen as her being like a pessimist. And I don't think that she is a pessimist at all. I think that she is just kind of, unfortunately, and maybe even looking at her character in a broader sense, like, she is somebody who's had to be pretty mature.
Yeah.
You know, like, she's been through it. And also she is in a family that went through a divorce. Her mother is very, very overworked. She's been parentified a little bit in that she looks after her younger sisters and is like making sure that they're fed and things like that. Her mother isn't like completely absent or anything, but she's had to step it up quite a bit. And I think that all of that really grounds her in a sense of reality and in also making sure that she has all the facts before jumping to conclusions on success.
Totally.
I think that she can jump to conclusions about who is the right person to physically assault in any given moment, but I think that that's like a different issue.
It's a different problem.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised that Marco wasn't on the same page as Rachel here.
Same.
I'm wondering
typically they're like right there together.
Yeah, we find out in this book that Marco's situation has kind of improved. I wonder if he's just feeling more optimistic.
Dude, I hope so.
Oh,
Good for him.
Good for him.
Ugh, my boy.
Nevermorphed is hosted, edited, and produced by Will Williams. Our theme music is The Chase by Joey Hendricks. Our title is by Eddie Feely, and this podcast would not exist without Mike Schubert's podcast, Potterless and the Newest Olympian. You can find his works at shub.es, that's shub.es. Nevermorphed is a proud member of Hug House Productions. You can find more at hughouse.productions and follow us on Tumblr at Nevermorphed. Get morphin'!
On March 27th, 2024, Elon Musk was deposed in a libel lawsuit filed by Ben Brody. Musk's lawyer, Alex Spiro, tried to retroactively mark the deposition as confidential, but it wasn't.
Of course I can ask him, do you think you committed actual malice? Do you think you were reckless? Of course I can ask those questions.
The deposition is a new Hug House podcast reenactment of the entire deposition, word by word, in full, taken very seriously.
Things that he did wrong.
But that's the point. That's not what you're allowed
Until he really just can't anymore?
Not what you're allowed to do in the deposition. You can't just get him talking.
The deposition drops on the 4th of July, 2024, with 4 weekly episodes. Subscribe on your podcatcher of choice or find us at hughouse.productions today.